makes us who we are.
I guess it's about time I find out who I am.
Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is an interesting adventure. It's a mixture of things we have previously seen and things we desperately wanted to see finally implemented successfully in a Star Wars game. First, let me open by making a statement. I'm not a Star Wars fan.
Saying boo or boo-earns?
I don't hate the franchise by any means, but I would not describe myself as a die-hard fan of it. I watched and I liked the original trilogy, but unfortunately for me, I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, when the most popular Star Wars movies of the time were Episode 1, 2, and 3. The first Star Wars movie I have ever seen was The Phantom Menace.
Have you ever encountered a Jedi Knight before, son?
The first Star Wars game I've ever played was The Phantom Menace on PS1. That one I actually did enjoy.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Your feelings serve you well, Obi-Wan, but don't let them cloud your judgment.
I also played Rogue Squadron and Episode 1 Racer. I really loved those games. However, I would say that outside of these few experiences, my knowledge of the Star Wars universe is very limited. So after watching The Mandalorian, my curiosity peaked again.
The foundlings are the future. This is the way.
This is the way.
I started having some of those feelings I had when I was a kid when I played the first good Star Wars games. So I decided to give Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Cal Kestis another chance, despite the fact that this game was published by EA. I decided to hold back my preconceptions and dive in head first. With very little knowledge of the universe, very little knowledge of the game, and an average level of excitement. Before we dive into the review, allow me to break down my own review system. I like to review my games using 5 categories: gameplay, storyline, graphics, soundtrack, and last but not least, performance. Each category is graded on a maximum of 20 points. The grades for all categories and then added up to give us a rating on a scale of 100. It's not a perfect system by any means, but it is the best one I could come up with that could give me an objective appreciation of the game. So it is just that, it is really my appreciation of the game. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I highly encourage you to comment below. Gameplay is undoubtedly one of the standout features of Jedi Fallen Order. It mixes exploration, some puzzle solving, and Souls-like combat. The exploration draws from classic Metroidvanias, as some areas of the map require you to acquire more advanced traversal skills to progress through them. In that way, the game does encourage tracking back to previously explored areas and planets in order to climb, wall run, or force push your way through obstacles. In that sense, despite progression in the game being quite linear, the exploration itself still rewards players for revisiting areas with secrets, experience, and some unique encounters. The game does not hide the fact that it is heavily influenced by From Software game design. Progression through areas is punctuated by meditation circles, which allow you to regenerate your stim packs, your health, and level up your skills. After meditating, all enemies respawn at exactly the same spot as they were before, with the exact same dialogue and actions that previously occurred. As it is the case with Souls games, unique enemies do not respawn. In short, meditation circles are the same thing as bonfires, except you cannot fast travel between meditation circles, like ever. Which brings me to my next point: world traversal. Jedi Fallen Order gives a lot of options as you progress through the game. Kyle can climb walls from the get-go. Later on, you acquire skills like wall run, double jump, and force pull, which allows you to pull ropes and vines towards you as you are jumping from one area to another. It's really fun. It reminds me of some of the platforming that was introduced in the Uncharted series and then adopted by so many other games. And just like those games, it's sometimes incomprehensible why some walls are climbable while others are not, despite the fact that they look identical. but that's video game logic for you. The use of force is really an interesting part of platforming. You can slow down platforms, giving you time to jump between them. You can also pull other platforms towards you, making them just close enough to reach with a jump or a double jump. The biggest problem with Jedi Fallen Order's world traversal mechanics in my mind is the complete absence of fast travel between meditation circles. This in itself makes backtracking and exploring very cumbersome, as you need to go through an entire planet in order to get to an item that you may have forgotten. If you are a completionist like me, this may be a big problem. The game is quite linear, and once you beat it, you are simply done and out of there. However, for the players who like to go back and find items that they might have missed, brace yourself for a terrible time.
Got something?
And if you don't believe me, let me show you the map and what it looks like to try and find something that you may or may not have missed in order to get 100% completion. Let me just say that I fully understand and appreciate that because of the multi-leveled nature of the game designers opted for a 3D map. What I don't understand is, why is this thing so difficult to navigate? Why is there no radar or compass that can help you find your way around the world so that you can get to wherever you need to faster and with less frustration? Also, why can't you place markers on the map? I feel like this is a basic feature in most games, so why not this one? All of these issues could have been significantly alleviated by allowing players to travel between meditation circles. When you have already played the game and gone through the cinematic sequences, it feels kind of silly to have to redo them again just because you forgot to scan a giant bird feather that is sitting on top of a tree. As far as character customization goes, there are some options. You can change the color of your lightsaber and customize its handle and other parts. You can also change your outfit, the type of poncho you are wearing, and change the color of your ship, the Mantis. And you can of course get new skins for your sidekick BD1. All of these modifications are unlocked by exploring the world and looting chests. I would say that the customization is rather limited, as you can't really change anything about Cal's physical appearance, but this is a very minor criticism. I do wish, however, that some of the ponchos and skins brought a little more to the table. As far as I can tell, switching ponchos only changes the look of Cal Kestis and doesn't really add any special abilities or perks. Like I said, it's not a major issue, just something I think I would have made these collectibles a little more worthwhile. That being said, let's move on to the next killer feature of Jedi Fallen Order's gameplay: combat. Before I tell you what I think about combat, I want you to listen to this first.
Guess it's a race fight now?
Is there anything more satisfying than the sound of a lightsaber combat? I don't think so. As you probably have guessed or already know, combat in Jedi Fallen Order is quite good. It's precise, strategic, and relies on good timing in order to successfully parry your opponents. The parrying mechanic is very similar to that of Sekiro's Shadows Die Twice, and that's a good thing. In addition to parrying, the use of the Force in combat sequences is very satisfying. You can pull your enemies towards you for a quick lightsaber execution. You can force push an entire group of enemies. You can slow down stronger enemies to give yourself time to heal or back off. I am very happy to say that the Force is not just a gimmick. It's a core feature of combat, puzzle solving, and exploration. All of this to say that combat is really good. You can't just button mash your way through the game. You have to adopt a strategic approach to different enemies, while boss fights are intense and cinematic.
You look finished, Jedi!
As you progress through the story, you unlock new combat abilities by acquiring experience and leveling up. Each level up earns you a skill point, which you can then spend to earn new combat moves and techniques that will allow you to deal higher damage and deal better with new combat situations. The skill tree is quite expansive and not too large. There is very little filler, and most of the skills do feel very useful. As you progress through the game, you can feel that Cal's combat abilities are improving and that you are able to deal with previously difficult situations with more ease.
That droid was a killer!
However, combat is not without fault. The enemies in Jedi Fallen Order are not as varied as one would hope them to be, especially considering the fact that we travel and explore about a half a dozen planets. Many enemies are recycled throughout different environments and their attack patterns become predictable. In addition to that, there are some glaring inconsistencies in the enemies. Stormtroopers, just like in the movies, are ridiculously easy to dispatch and more often than not feel like filler. On the other hand, some enemies, combination of enemies and boss fights can feel a bit too much to deal with. Luckily, this doesn't happen very often, and if you are cautious with how you approach each section of the game, you will encounter these difficulty spikes only during boss fights, which makes sense. All in all, I would say that Jedi Fallen Order is not a difficult game, but the difficulty can sometimes feel random. To sum up the gameplay section, I would say that Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order feels like a proof of concept. We haven't had a good Star Wars game in a long time, and the studio behind the game has attempted to give us something that most have failed to do. A good Star Wars game, with solid gameplay and a good story. In my opinion, the gameplay remains one of the best part of this game despite inconsistencies, and that is why I'm giving it a 17 out of 20. Graphics are another forte of Jedi Fallen Order. The planets you explore, ranging from lush forests of Kashyyyk to the desolate ruins of Dathomir, are visually stunning and brimming with detail. Each environment feels alive with its own character, flora, fauna, and architecture. Even though some of the planets do feel empty, they are not uninteresting. The environments are well crafted and I always felt the urge to explore, read logs left behind and search for secrets. If I was to talk just about one planet, and because I don't want to spoil the entirety of the game for you, I would talk about Bogano, the first planet you land on with your crew. Bogano is the first planet that you are introduced to and where you are allowed to roam freely. It has wide open spaces and it's mostly uninhabited. Once you land on it, you will quickly realize that this place is steeped in Jedi lore. You will find an abandoned workshop, tall structures and ruins, and of course, it is the resting place for the Vault, a massive ancient structure that was built by the Zepho. This, as you will find out, plays a central role in the story of Jedi Fallen Order. Bogano is meant to be a safe place for the player as they begin their journey. You can clearly see that from the lush greenery, diffused lighting, and largely empty spaces. It's meant to entice the player to explore while they are feeling generally safe to do so. Bogano is beautiful, yes, but it is by no means a standout. The developers did a great job combining lighting, detailed textures, and creative world design to craft planets that feel really unique and most of all realistic. Dynamic lighting plays a critical role in the game's tone. As you travel between planets, the color palette changes. Dathomir, for instance, is marked by red and orange tones. The blood red skies and jagged rock formations are probably there to make you feel that you are in a very messed up place and that you should get your business done as quickly as you can and get out. Which is exactly what I did. Character models are also very well rendered, particularly the major ones like Cal Kestis, Seer, and the rest of your crew. The facial animations are on par with some of the best I have seen out there. This is a very important part of the game since Star Wars movies and shows have a very unique cinematic style, and the character models really helped bring the entire thing to life. In short, Jedi Fallen Order looks really awesome and is very immersive. I have very little criticism of the graphics. However, I would say that since I played this on PlayStation 5, the game was plagued with technical issues that sometimes did take me out of the moment. Just take a look at this. Yeah, I had to reboot the game to fix it several times, and this really took me out of the experience.
Trilla, the second sister, is gone for now, but she's still chasing us. I defeated the ninth sister.
The storyline is very interesting. I'm going to describe it in as vague terms as possible to avoid completely spoiling it for those who have not played the game yet. I will try to focus as much as possible on characters and the beginning of the story rather than going on a breakdown of the entire thing. Having said that, there will be some minor spoilers as it is impossible to discuss the storyline without revealing anything. Alright, so the premise is very simple. Cal Kestis is a young Jedi Padawan who survived Order 66. At the beginning of the game, Cal is living in hiding as a fugitive working on the junkyard planet Bracca. He managed to stay hidden all this time because he has not been using the Force for many years. However, some unexpected events forced him to use his Jedi abilities, which in turn drew the attention of the Imperial forces. This is when you are quickly introduced to your nemesis. The story of Jedi Fallen Order is centered on survival, redemption, and hope against the backdrop of the very dark period that has followed the Jedi Purge. If you are trying to situate the game within the Star Wars canon, then you should probably know that the game is taking place 5 years after the events of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and the execution of Order 66, which marks the purge or extermination of the Jedi Order by Emperor Palpatine, hence the title Jedi Fallen Order. As the Jedi being all but eliminated, the Empire pretty much roams the galaxy unopposed and is ruthlessly hunting and eliminating any surviving Jedi. If you have watched Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, you already know that Jedi Fallen Order draws heavily from that movie. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The first Star Wars movie was a phenomenal success, and I think that it still holds up despite how old it is. But because the story is familiar to us, it is also quite predictable. The idea of rebuilding the Jedi Order and fighting the Empire is an all too familiar one. We have seen it play many times. In that sense, the story does not really break any new narrative ground, despite how well written and executed it is. The themes of hope, redemption, and overcoming past failures are core to Star Wars, but I still would have liked to see a bit more nuance and a new perspective that could have helped Fallen Order stand out more. Instead, Cal's journey kind of feels like a side story, despite it fitting nicely into the universe's lore. Because of how the story ends, leaving the whole future of the Order in uncertainty, the story does not feel like it has a big impact on the universe. Maybe this is something that will be addressed in Jedi Survivor. We will see. Despite all of this, I still think that the story was compelling enough and well executed enough to make me want to find out more about the Star Wars universe. I also liked my experience enough to purchase the sequel immediately after having finished Fallen Order. I have a feeling, or maybe it is just me wishing, that Cal Kestis and his sidekick BD-1 are going to become major characters within the Star Wars universe. To me, their bond was more endearing than that of Luke Skywalker's had with his droids. In fact, I would say that the bond that Cal and BD-1 have and develop throughout the game is probably one of the best things about this game. Soundtrack and audio design can play a crucial part in any story-driven video game. It can immerse the player into the environment, make it feel more authentic, and help convey whatever emotion the game director is trying to convey to the player. Luckily, the soundtrack and general audio in Jedi Fallen Order is really well put together. The soundtrack was composed by Stephen Barton, the same composer behind the Titanfall series, and Gordy Habb, the man behind the audio design of the Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Old Republic games. So we are talking about two experienced composers with very respectable credentials. Naturally, the soundtrack feels authentic to the Star Wars identity and feel. The sound design, aka audio effects or sound effects, of Fallen Order are also top tier. The lightsaber sound design is flawless, combining the classic hum, clash, and igniting sounds to perfection. When using the Force, the audio cues feel very rich and powerful. The environmental audio design is also spot on. Each planet has a unique audio identity that makes it feel very much alive and different from the previous planets you have visited. I have found that Kashyyyk, the home of the Wookiees, has the strongest audio design, as it felt very authentic to what one would come to expect from exploring a jungle. One sound effect that really stayed with me the entire game and beyond is BD's beeps and boops. The game designers have done such an amazing job making BD1's whistles and chirps convey and communicate his emotions without the use of words. I found myself very much liking BD and developing a bond that is not unlike one that I would develop with my own dog. The sound cues he gave me all along my playthrough were very engaging, and my interest always peaked whenever I heard him chirp.
Good scan, BD.
If I had one minor criticism that would keep Jedi Fallen Order from having a perfect score in this category, it would be this one. It was flawless, but it was not memorable. After having played it and finished it, I cannot for the life of me remember what the main theme of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was. This is not something that happened to me with other games like God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, or The Last of Us. For that reason, and that reason only, I will give Jedi Fallen Order soundtrack and sound design a 19 out of 20. Amazing, but not perfect. This is where Jedi Fallen Order really lags behind.
That was a close one, kid.
I played the PS5 version of this PS4 game on my PS5. My thinking was, it's been out a few years and it should have been optimized, plus it came out on PS4, so it should work just fine on PS5. Wrong. The first problem I encountered with this game is related to cutscenes. Very early on I noticed that when I suspend the game and put my console to sleep, something that I do several times a day, the next time I resumed playing, the audio and video were not synchronized.
Waffle could be anywhere, like deep in the ground, like we're gonna be if we get caught up in that battle down there.
We don't have any other options, and we'll die without our help.
I don't have to tell you that this takes you completely out of the story, no matter how well put together the scene is that you are watching. Thankfully, this is easily fixable just by closing the game and restarting it. But still, this is not a small budget game, and buggy cutscenes should not be a thing in 2025. I have also noticed some inconsistencies in the frame rate despite playing this entire game in performance mode. This was more obvious on Kashyyyk than any other place because of the aforementioned jungle environment and the abundance of enemies and other local fauna. The stuttering and dips in performance are less noticeable on PS5, but they're still there. I can only imagine what this game ran and looked like on PS4 and Xbox One. I also came across one issue that almost ruined my entire Platinum run. I also experienced a couple crashes where the game either stopped responding altogether or just crashed and closed itself. Not gonna lie to you, I found this to be very disappointing, because in my mind this is an easily fixable issue and it prevents the game from having a higher review score. So for that reason I will give it a 14 out of 20, because it does not have any major issues, but the optimization is just poor enough to get in the way of the enjoyment of the game. Before we get to the summary, I just would like to thank you all for watching all the way through. This is my first video ever, and if you have liked it, please do give it a like so that other people can find it just like you did. Also, if you have any comments or anything you want to add, please do not hesitate to do so. I'm sure there are things I have missed in my review.
Love it when I'm wrong.
I have to admit that I had my reservations about this game. As someone who is not a Star Wars geek and who has general skepticism when it comes to companies like EA and Ubisoft, I approached this game with almost no expectations. I suspected that the game would be solid thanks to some of the footage I have seen prior to playing the game. And you know what? The gameplay definitely did live up to the hype. What I did not expect is to find myself wanting to learn more about the Star Wars universe after playing this game. I found the story to be very compelling and the experience to be overall welcoming to people who are not familiar with the franchise. Also, I did not expect to care as much about the cast of characters, but I did.
Hey, Cal. I made a mistake.
And I almost got you killed. I'm sorry.
This is the first time in my life that I can say that I am genuinely excited about a Star Wars game, and I cannot wait to see what the cast of Jedi Fallen Order is going to do on their next adventure.
We're all in this together, aren't we?